Hey David,
There we go. Hey John, how you doing?
doing great, thanks. I'm gonna try and put us side by side if I can. This doesn't work. I love the way Zoom's UX changes all the time, confusing the hell out of all of us.
All the time.
You know what? Looks like this is the best we can do. But it's nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too.
Um, I usually have a little bit more of a professional background, but I'm moving house at the moment, so my desk and everything else is gone, and I'm just sitting on the couch doing business today.
That's totally fine. At least you're not in a bed. I've done that before, so it's totally fine. I'd be awkward. It'd be a little awkward if it was like, hey, you're sitting in a bed. I think it'd be a good idea if we reschedule. But I have done meetings like that before, so it's all good. It happens.
I've kicked people off of Zoom calls for showing up in bed shirtless.
Well, that's different. That's different. I would just leave. I wouldn't even say anything. But yeah, it's all good.
Okay.
Anyway,
No, I do have
yeah,
one person I work with who I know they do the blurred background, but I know that they're actually in bed when they do the calls, but they're fully clothed, so it's okay.
100%. 100%.
Thanks so much for coming here. This is the Cash from Connections podcast. I'm John Caprani. You are David Schloss. Would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Absolutely. Yeah. So I first got started in the online space back in 2007. I was 18 at the University of Florida when I first discovered that building a business online was a real thing. Even though I knew that there were online businesses, I didn't know I could figure it out, especially since there wasn't much information on how to do it back then. Um, a lot of the tools I use now didn't exist, and so back then I had to, hard code everything with HTML and CSS. It was all WordPress or Joomla sites or whatever platform was around back then, and I dabbled with SEO until I stumbled upon paid ads, which at that time Facebook was so new that their paid ads platform, which is what I'm known for, uh, was in its infancy. It was the wild, wild west, and so I did a little bit of everything until paid advertising became the thing that people were requesting the most, which was around 2011. And so I went basically my entire college career just dabbling with everything, and then in 2011, 2012, I was like, you know what, I'm just going to do paid ads, and that's it. And I went all in with social ads because back then it was like who's doing anything on social media really. So if you were able to figure it out, it was a gold mine. And so I went all in on that. Uh, in the early 2010s, still to this day, run ads for people.
Hmm.
Uh, I've of course dabbled with other things like affiliate marketing and built my own products and whatnot. But at the end of the day, I've had an agency. First was just a one-man band. Now I have a team of, if you want to include the full-time and part-timers, almost 20 people, right?
Wow.
And so, yeah, it's a machine now, and spending around $3 million a month for people. So naturally, it's a very different game than when I first started out, because I don't think back then people even considered spending $100 a day, let alone $1,000 a day or $10,000 a day. And now it's like, oh yeah, spend $1,000 a day. Oh, okay, yeah, no problem. It's like, what? And so yeah, it's a very, very awesome situation to be in. But put in a lot of work, and now I own and operate Convert ROI, which is my agency, and you know, been around ever since.
Awesome. Do you remember the first time on Facebook ads where something really popped off and you're like, oh shit, this is real?
Yeah, yeah. It was around 2010 because it was the first time someone came to me and said, "Can you run ads for my webinar?" Webinars did exist back then. They were, teleseminars and all that sort of thing. But
Hmm.
it was the first time I ever was told I need to run ads to this page when they weren't even calling it a landing page. They were like, can you just send traffic to this page? And I need people to register, and they're going to be in my autoresponder, and I want them to show up to my go-to webinar. Right? It was all spelled out. Right now everything's abbreviated, but it was all spelled out. I'm like, first off, what's a webinar? Second, sure, I'll figure it out. Right? And because no one was really running ads to webinars that far back, it was easy because it looked like a generic opt-in page, but it's like, hey, but we're going to do this presentation at 8 p.m. on a Thursday. and we're going to teach you how to build a business online. Very biz-oppy, right? Just
Hmm.
want to build a business online and make $100 a day? Yes. Okay, go sign up here, right? It was very in your face because compliance didn't really care back then. And so I remember running those ads, which, man, stock photo ad, maybe 5 lines of text max, right? It was just very short, and I was rotating stock images because I'm like, I don't know what the hell I'm going to create for this. And so I put that up, and I remember my client and I know the client, I just won't say his name, but like we looked a day later, and he's like, 300 people have already registered. I'm like, excuse me, how? How's that possible? And he's like, we're getting like $1.50 a lead. And that's when my brain was like, hold on, wait a minute. We might have something here because he was one of the few people at the time where he's like, I want to spend as much money as I can as fast as possible. That was my gateway into, I didn't know you could spend $1,000 a day. I didn't know you could spend $3,000 a day. But he was the first person that was like, you know what? I need as many people to register for this webinar as possible, as many as possible. I need to max out this go to webinar account, which was 1,000 people, right? I want 1,000 people concurrently live. Okay. Well, how do I get you 1,000 concurrent viewers? Well, we need around at least 3 to 4,000 registrants. Okay. Well, when your registrants only cost $1.50, you're gonna take the chance because you're like, if I can get 1,000 people online and I can convert 100 sales at $300, I think it's worth it. I think I can make it work. And so it was my first full push on a campaign where it's like, let's just see what can happen. Right. And of course, using probably one of the worst looking ads I created at the time, nothing was custom. I was just throwing up stock images, but it worked. And yet I was like, okay, I wonder how many people know about webinars? How many people can I run webinar ads for? And who's going to trust me with the money to do so? Because back then it was like my budget for the month was, $2,000 or $3,000. How many webinar registrants can I get every week? And it's like maybe 300, maybe 400. Imagine that. Like now, if I'm just like, oh, I'm gonna get you 300 or 400 registrants, it's like $2,800, right?
Hmm.
$3,000. Back then, it's like, give me $500. I'll figure something out. And so it was a interesting time. And of course, I wish I utilized that knowledge and did a lot more of my own stuff. But back then I was just thinking about like, how could I just be the best at this one thing? Because I didn't know that it would turn into what it's turned into. So
Hmm.
I was just trying to hone in on being the best advertiser I can be, spending the most I could. And then once I had that knowledge, it's like, okay, now go do it for yourself. So yeah, I remember that first campaign. It was insane.
When you do something like that at the beginning, it's because it's something you've never done before. You've got no idea what's going to happen, and you've got no idea if you're doing it right.
Right.
Do you remember when you got to the point where you're like, "Yeah, I'm actually really good at this," and
Mm-hmm.
how did that feel?
Yeah, I was outside of college at that point. So I graduated and I still wasn't sure if this was going to be a long-term thing because I wasn't making enough to just completely live off of it for a whole year, right? So think about it. I'm already 5, 6 years into the game. I'm really good, but the business is like this. It's just constantly up and down. So I'd have months where I'm like, man, this is great. I'm gonna live off this, no problem. And then there'd be months where I'm like, this sucks. I'm not making enough at all. And this is adjusted for inflation, right? Let's also keep that in mind. If I was making 3K a month back then, I was good. I'm living. Me, my girlfriend, now my wife, now, but back then my girlfriend, just her and I, no crazy expenses, just getting by. I had to make 3 grand, which back then, because I didn't know how to charge what I was worth, was at least 3 to 4 clients. And because everyone was so scared of spending back then, it was tough. Because even for the people that I'd crush it for, I'd crush it so well, they'd pause for a couple months and then come back and be like, all right, we're going to do a launch. We're going to spend $10,000. And then 2 or 3 months later, all right, man, I'll see you again in a couple months. It's like, I can't do this up and down, up and down, up and down. So because I had that inconsistency, I still had wasn't even a part-time job. I had a full-time job while building the agency. I was working 60 hours a week. And I remember being it at my job at the time. I was a marketing manager at 22 years old. It was crazy because I walked in like, you guys don't know anything about ads. Let me show you what I could do with some ads. And of course, it's like you put $5 in and it's all these people are showing up. They're like, oh, he has the magic sauce. Like, let's just let him do it. Yeah. So I took over a whole department at 22 years old. But while doing that, I'm miserable because I'm like, I don't want to be here. And of course, I'm building my agency on their dime, working at their office, taking calls on my phone. Just, I'm doubling up. And I remember having a campaign, it was around 2012, because I remember I left in 2012. I ran another webinar campaign. This was for the week. I was allowed to spend $3,000. And I was like, okay, I'm gonna just obliterate this campaign for this guy. At this time, it's the same dude who gave me that chance the first time around. We're already 2 years into this thing. We have a process down. He's like, I want to spend the most I've ever spent in a week and see what happens. So we were like, let's do 3 grand and see what happens. And this was one of those campaigns where I just hit the nail on the head. People were signing up for like 80 cents a piece. And he's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know. We're going to figure this out. And then just the hundreds of people a day were signing up. It's just nonstop. And I just knew I hit gold on this. It was at that moment, I'm like, if I could just get more people like this guy, if I could just get 10 people like this guy, I'd be set. I don't have to do this job anymore. Now, mind you, I'm still at the job. I'm sitting at the desk, going back and forth on Skype with this guy, because that's what I was using back then. There was no messenger, right? I'm just
Mhm.
going back and forth in Skype. And he's telling me the data. And I remember he did his webinar, send it to me at night, told me what the results were. He made about $120,000 at night from a $3,000 spend. And he's like, I think we're going to do this every week. And I'm like, well, I'm going to have to increase my rate if that's the case. He's like, that's fine. Just tell me how much and I'll pay it. And I was like, oh my God. Okay. This guy's willing to pay whatever. But at the same time, I was like, can you refer me to a couple people? Because I feel like I do this for more people. And that was the beginning of going from I'm managing 3 or 4 accounts to now I have to manage 8. Literally within a couple weeks, I went from around 3 or 4 because I was on and off with one to having 8 concurrent, and I was like, oh my God, okay, I've never managed this many accounts at one time. I've never managed this much spend at one time, but the money's cool, so I'm gonna figure this out. And that was the beginning of me being like, I think I could do this full time. Literally a month later from that happening, I put in my 2 weeks and I got out of that job because I'm like, I could do this now. Not realizing I needed help, not realizing I didn't understand how to keep clients happy, not understanding how to do proper reporting. I was still figuring all this out. I didn't have a ton to work with at the time, right? And so at the end of the day, I was like, I'll figure this out. One way or another, I'm going to figure this out, but I know I'm really good at this entire process. And so naturally, I just went ahead and kept running ads, and I just kept collecting case studies, which at the time I wasn't putting them anywhere. I was just collecting data. And I knew that at some point I'm gonna have to start promoting myself, but I wasn't promoting myself at all. I just allowed myself to get referrals and just keep building because still people weren't that trusting of running ads on Facebook at that level. Right. Instagram didn't really exist. It wasn't a part of the network. And so it was all Facebook. It was all the feed, right hand column, and that's it. There wasn't much else. If you were running video ads, you were different because there weren't many people running videos. It was all images, just as many images as you could. So it was a very it was a up and down time because it's like business, no business, business again, no business. But that was how things were. You either had a huge corporation you were running ads for, or you were running ads for a guy that had a 7-figure business somehow online. And you're like, I don't know how he did it, but he did. And you just sort of went on with figuring it out. Once e-commerce became a part of the equation, that's when it was like, wow, now we have an open playing field here. Now there's a lot of people we could sign. Shopify eventually came around. WooCommerce was already around. It's like, okay, there's some big business that could be done here. But once again, I'm a 22, 23-year-old straight out of college, no understanding of how to brand myself, just a technician. that understands
Hmm.
data and develops strategy. And that was it. I didn't know what else to do. Where am I going to get clients? Do I have to go to a BNI meeting? Do I have to, walk door to door? I didn't know. So when I started asking for referrals, yeah, I got some people trickling in here and there. But man, I had to explain why you had to be on the network, why you had to give it a shot, why you should trust me with $3,000 or $4,000. Oh, it's a lot of money. Like, that was a lot of money for some people. It's like that's half my revenue, right? Just stuff like that. And it was a tough time. But it was the beginning because I was one of the few people that could be like, let me show you what I just did for this guy. And if we do this a couple times, I could definitely see us doing similar or at least close to similar numbers. And I know that was the most compliant way to promote it, but it's like, what am I going to do? There was no one else doing stuff like this. So here's your proof, right? And so it was tough, but also exciting because it was like I could see where this is going. But man, 2012, 2013, even 2014 were some tough years, but it was the beginning of the Facebook advertising gold rush because that's when Teespring came around and Shopify came around, and man, drop shipping, all of the new terminology, the page builders that came out, it was just like that was when if you had money to spend, that was when you would turn a dollar into 10 like it was no problem. That was when you would do it. So, yeah.
Did the confidence from those early wins give you enough insight that you said, I can actually, I'm charging too little, I can charge a lot more, and it's still great value for the client? Or did it still take more work before you got there?
It took a little more time because my breakout year was 2016.
Hmm.
Breakout, I mean, when I finally hit a level of stability and belief in myself to sign clients without having to worry about referrals. That was also the first year that I put out a case study, which that was when Facebook's feed was finally, I'll call it developed enough to where I could put out a full length case study with either a video or an image and multiple images, break down how something was done. This is also when Facebook was popular enough that the average business wanted to look into it now. Like it was at the point where everyone was starting to ask. Everyone, small business, big business, didn't matter. It was like, we're running Facebook ads. And when I put out that first case study, which I have the links to all of my case studies, they're still live. Like, as long as my profile is active, they're there. And it was way back then. And, talking about lookalike audiences and, there wasn't a universal pixel back then. It was just the conversion pixel and custom conversions, right? That's what it was. And so I talked about the audience structure and just how I got people registrants for their webinars and how many ads we ran and the audiences we targeted, just all of it. And I remember putting out that case study, and it was my first experience of a wave of people saying, "How do I work with you?"
Nice.
Not one person. It was like legitimately 10 people. Like, I will start tomorrow if you can do exactly what you talked about. I'm like, I could do this every day. I just don't do it with a lot of people, right? And that's all it was. I'm getting paid $1,000 a month per client, which to me at the time was a lot, and not realizing one of my good friends was charging 3K per person in 2016, right? And I was like, there's no way people are going to pay that. They were paying it. I just wasn't confident in myself to charge that. But that case study was my first foray into being like, what if I charge 2,000? All right, I'm not gonna charge three. I'm not gonna charge one anymore. Maybe I'll charge 2,000, maybe 1,500. Maybe people say yes. Maybe I should have a sliding scale based upon how much someone spends. Maybe if they're spending 50K, I charge them five. Right? Just stuff like that. And that case study allowed me to test. That's really what it was. It was like an ad campaign. I put it out, and I'm like, now let me just test my pricing. Just see what happens. This person's 1,500. This one's 2,000. This one's 2,500. Which ones are getting no's? Which are getting yeses? What industries are saying yes and no? And then I was like, okay, out of those 10, I signed seven. Hmm. And they're all signing up for two apiece. Huh. Okay. That's weird. Now I'm making $14,000 a month more out of the gate with one case study. Now you're addicted. Now you're just like, I'm gonna put out a case study all the time. I'm gonna make all this money all the time. That's not what I was doing. Obviously, I was like, I can't support this much business all at the same time every single week. But it was at least enough to go, if I need business bad enough, I'll put out another case study. Maybe I'll at least put out one every month, because if I can get one or two new people every month, I can establish my business a bit more. It'll also prove to people I'm really good at what I do. It'll put me in front of new people. And I started doing that. I actually put out a case study every month for 2.5 to 3 years, almost 3 whole years. And
Wow.
anytime things slowed down, a case study was referenced. Anytime I wanted to ramp up, a case study was always referenced. I have people to this day that work with me that have referenced old case studies. Oh, I remember when I started working with you, I saw that case study on your feed. I think it was like 2018. How do you remember? How? But that's what they remember. They remember the depth. They remember how I just gave away everything. They remember how I answered every question. Like if you had 300 comments on a post back then around data, no memes. Maybe we wouldn't call them memes. They were just funny images back then. But it's like we didn't have memes or anything going crazy. But if you put up something and it was all data and you had 300 comments, you were doing something right. And every case study I was putting up was getting 1 to 200 comments. I'm like, man, people want this stuff. They want it all the time. Now you put up a case study and it's 50 to 100 if you're lucky, right? It has to be a crazy case study because the feeds have been flooded with fake proof and, you know, oh, look at my case study. And it's like 4 purchases. I'm like, I put out a case study after like 4 months. Like I don't do it after 4 days. I wait 4 months. I need to make sure this is real. I need to make sure this is legit. But now people are putting up these case studies that are like, oh, look at the results. And it's like 2 days later. It's like, what? And so I used that time to establish my, credibility, my brand, my authority. I did as many podcasts as I could and web shows. Like back when they weren't a hot thing, it was like I was just doing as many as I could because I needed people to see what a real media buyer looked like. It's like this is what I've been doing since 2007 before it was popular. Now it's popular and I'm still doing it. Like that was a huge thing too. It's like, look, I'm not hopping around. Like I'm still doing this. Like I'm still doing it now, right? So it was my first foray into people believing in what I do, but then it was also the first time I had a 5-figure month consistently. It was the first time that I had multiple clients. I mean, we're talking like 15 to 20 at any time. It was the first time that I put out content that people naturally wanted to read and then work with me from. Like all these things were firsts. But look how long it was later, from 2007 to 2016, and I didn't have the breakthrough till 2016. I went broke 2 separate times before then to make this stuff work, right? Just trying out different things, trying out services. Maybe I'll get press. Maybe I'll build a bunch of websites and see what happens. Maybe I'll spend 10 grand on my own site and people will land on it, want to work. Nope. None of that mattered until I started putting out the case studies. All of a sudden, it didn't matter if my site wasn't updated in 4 years because people weren't even going there. Right. And so, yeah, it was a interesting time for me to experience that because I needed to see that people believed in me as much as I believed in myself. And also being able to charge more and people being like, oh, you should be charging way more than that. It's the validation I needed. It's all I needed to hear. And now, I mean, I have some prices of stuff that I do that are very similar to where they were 6, 7 years ago. Not because I don't think I should charge more. It's fair market rate. Like that's what it should be. And when I help you scale, I'll charge you more. Like that's how it should be. So yeah, very, very very telling time as well, because it's like, okay, who's still around? If you look at all the stuff that was published back then, how many of those people are still doing ads to this day? And I can at least say that as well about everything I had published back then. So
I love it. And these are great, 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 deep, detailed answers.
mhm.
And at this point now today, is
Mhm.
case study still the backbone of your self-marketing and self-promotion?
I get asked about case studies more than anything, but then they also want to ask about business longevity because I mean, man, half my life has been ads. I'm currently 35. I started at 18. Like it's half my life. And not many people do the same thing for half their life, let alone have the same business for half their life. and have managed to build a solid foundation of clients for over, for me, it would be almost 10 years consistently of just like building and not falling apart, even with economic events happening and, certain years being unfavorable more than others. It's like, I'm still here. So I get asked a lot about how did you maintain this business without it falling apart and having to do something completely different? Remember all the times that people said Facebook was going to die? Facebook's not going to be around. The ad
Still here.
platform's dying. No one's going to buy on Facebook anymore. What are you talking about? They just had record profits again. Like, clearly people are still buying because that's all ad money. Those are ads. We are spending billions on ads. Clearly it works because if it wasn't, we wouldn't be spending on the platform. And so to still be doing this with the platform evolving, with all the crap going on in the world, not just in the US, but in the world, and to still have people go, I want to work with you. Yeah, I think there's something to that part of the story. Not to mention all the elections and other things, the politicizing of certain things and censorship, and been through all of it. Still here. That's what I get asked about. How did you manage to get through that? As much as they're asking about results. How are you still getting results with ecom? How are you getting results with webinars? Wasn't it cheap back then? How expensive is it now? It could still be cheap now because everything's adjusted for inflation. A 80-cent registration is now $3. Like that's what it is. But if you can
Hmm.
get $3 registrations, you are crushing it, right? And if you're getting 80-cent leads now, holy crap, right? So it's all relative. And I think that's where people ask me about those things because it's almost like, what was it like back then? I wasn't even that long ago. I'm the old guy, right? It's like I'm vintage in this space. I've been around for so long, right? But most people started this profession in the last 5 to 10 years. I started before that. So yeah, it's a lot around. It's a lot of stuff around like what was it like? How have things changed? What would you have done differently? A lot of that. And yeah, there's a lot of things I would have done differently. I definitely would have spent more on myself. If I knew that the lead cost was going to be that for those years, man, I should have a list of 100,000 people right now. I don't. But that's because I didn't understand the economics. I didn't understand it like my clients did. They had bigger businesses than me. They knew how to operate a team. I didn't. I had to learn all those things. I was a young guy who thought that no one older than me is going to want to work with me. What? My whole team is older than me, except for like two people, right? And if I just allowed myself to just hire without that stigma, I think I would have done a lot better. But I was scared. So how was I supposed to know?
Who was your first hire?
I hired a virtual assistant because I needed someone who would answer things for me when I wasn't around. I needed someone to make sure ad accounts were operating. And also, when you'd get that dreaded restricted account notice or ads rejected or whatever, I needed someone to at least monitor those things because by then, when you have double digit accounts, it's hard to keep track of all that stuff. And so
Hmm.
I needed her to just be monitoring things, drafting emails, drafting proposals, just the busier work. And it was the first person that I trusted with anything outside of the business. Don't log in my PayPal, don't log in my Stripe, but can you prepare the invoices? Like, can you get the stuff ready? And then I'll just do that last little step, right? I didn't give full ownership away of just like, go do it for me. But 95% of a lot of work was done by a VA. And she worked with me for about 6 years before she ended up getting a full-time gig with a bigger company, right?
Hmm.
But it was one of those things where having someone help you for 20 hours a week was huge, especially when you were doing everything yourself. And to think that back then I was like, oh man, I'm giving her $1,200 a month to help me with all this stuff. And I know you're overpaying. She's great. She's responsive. I don't have to double check all her work. Like that's what I was looking for. Is like I don't want to have to micromanage you and double check everything. Right? There was no language barrier. She knew how to write like me and sound like me. It was very much like I have a version of myself that can work during the hours that I'm not available. This is fantastic. Just don't run ads. Do everything else that's not ad related, and we're good. And that was my first hire, which helped a lot. That's how I was able to get to like the 18, 20 client mark, because all that managerial side of client reporting and communication updates and all that, that was her just getting it drafted for me. Hey, can you fill in this? Can you fill in this? And then send it. Sure. Save me a ton of time. Absolutely. Now, the next hire was probably the most crucial, which was a designer. Because by then, I'm like, I need custom designs. I need new graphics. I need someone who can make things different than stock images. Because at some point, stock images no longer worked with ads. And you had to start using the stock images and modifying them to fit whatever it is that you were promoting, adding some text on them and changing up, making them animated or whatever it is. And that was my next hire. That was massive because now I was able to provide custom graphics to every client that came on board. And this is also when like Facebook covers and just social media covers in general came around. So it was like, okay, if I'm going to help you with your ads and your Facebook page looks ugly, let me at least get you some graphics done. And we were doing that. And that was super helpful because now people's pages look top notch, right? Here's your profile image, graphic for the covers. Let's do some graphics for your regular organic content. And then let's do some content for, or some graphic content for your ads content. And we're just checking all the boxes. So the VA and then the graphics designer, absolute game changer at the time. And then from there, I was like, how many more do I need? Do I need another VA? Do I need an ad buyer? Do I need to train an ad buyer? Or do I just find someone who knows something already? And so I just naturally went up that ladder. I mean, probably like the most recent hire I've had is like legal team for contracts, right? And I was like, oh, I don't need a legal team. I can get some templates and throw them into DocuSign. Nope, got to customize these too, right? So then I was like, maybe I can get a legal team, on a per contract basis or an hourly thing. And I didn't think I'd ever need that. Now I got one. Anytime I need contracts, all right, send me the invoice. Here's all the docs I need, right? And they knock it out for me. And all I got to do is just plug it into PandaDoc and boom, send it, right? And so yeah, it's been a crazy ride, but that VA and that graphic designer saved my business back then because not many people had those. It was a lot of one man bands, one woman bands, but we all played like we were huge teams because we did a lot. So yeah, those two hires made a world of a difference.
And right now, today, what is the scope of what you do for a client? Do you still like say, hey, I do your advertising and everything else outside of that, or do you
Mhm.
kind of now spread out into more of the funnel?
Yeah, so we went from just media buying to ad content strategy, organic content strategy. Because what I had developed over time was just understanding what people want. Like, what are they looking for? If you can create content that people naturally like organically, then that content can also do well from an ad standpoint. So I studied a lot of organic content strategy to where every time I talk to a client, I ask them, like, what are you doing organically? Like, what are you trying to do to just generate a new audience that's outside of ads? So I do a lot of content strategy, consulting, both advertising wise and non advertising wise. Uh, I just do, I'll call it general business consulting, right? Because I do have clients that have come to me and they're like, what do I need to do from a financial standpoint? Like, do I need a financial planner? Do I need to hire a certain CPA? Because once again, I've done this for so long. They're like, what did you find that helped you from a financial standpoint as you were growing? Oh, well, I hired this team and they helped me with my taxes. Oh, can you refer me to them? Yeah, yeah, no problem. Boom. Now I help them with their financial situation. By the way, the amount of times I've sent someone to my tax team is insane. I've probably sent them 15 clients in the last couple of years just because I've had clients of mine who have no clue how to manage that stuff. Zero. They can make money all day. They just don't know how to preserve it and grow it outside of the business. Right. So they come to me. Hey, who do you use for this? Oh, I use this person and this person. Great. Boom. And once they get that solved, they don't have to think about it anymore. Right. So business consulting, advertising consulting, content consulting, a lot of consulting, right? I do a lot of phone calls with people. Then of course we do like the mapping of all this stuff, like what topics do they talk about? What who do they need for certain things? I'm very resourceful. So if they're like, I need a video person, no problem. Reach out to the network. Who's your recommended video person? Here's the three top choices. Here you go. Send them all the information. Take care of it, right? I'm almost looked as like the super connector, right? My forte is I can consult and run ads. I'm great at both. My team does that as well. We'll do some graphics for you. We'll help you with copy, but like we're not a video team. So let us connect you with the video people. We don't build all the funnels. We can, but if you want the top-notch funnel building team, we know them. Let us connect you to them. You want the best copywriters in the world? Got you. We'll send you to them. But we do ads. We are media buyers. We are data scientists at the end of the day. That's what we're going to focus on. And everyone else, let me connect you to the top people in my network because they will get the job done. So it's almost like assembling the Avengers. Like I'm putting all the super team together, but I am Captain America. Like I am at the forefront of this and I'm bringing everyone else around. And it's like, okay, we're here. But I'm not building that level of team in-house. One, it's never been my dream to have a gigantic agency. I've always loved the boutique model. And two, I like to build other things. So to have a gigantic team would take me away from building those other things. So let me put you in front of the people who are the A plus superstars at those other things, and then I will converge with them to run that as an ad campaign and as an organic campaign and make you as much money as you are looking to create. That's it.
Love it. You talked about, not just delivering results for clients, but you talked
Mhm.
about keeping clients happy. And one thing that is interesting is that delivering good results for clients is not the same thing as keeping clients happy. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So keeping clients happy is interesting because I I find that you can get results for people and they could still be very much unhappy. um, I've had clients where I've made them for every dollar they put in, they've been making $4 or $5 back, right? For context purposes. And we're talking month over month over month. And by the time we get to that 6 month mark, they're still unhappy. And there are a lot of things that could be the reason why that have nothing to do with me. It's outside factors that are outside of my control. But it's your job to just do what you were hired for and do it at the best of your ability and to communicate what it is that was done. That's a part of the media buying, scope of work. But sometimes there's a disconnect in personalities. And you only discover this after you start working with someone, right? I've had people that I work with and I'm very direct, very direct. When a client of mine screws up, whether they mess something up, an account gets shut down because they were playing around with stuff that they shouldn't have been playing around with, or they change text on the page without telling me and now all our results are bad and whatever it may be. I'm not the one that goes, it's okay. We're going to figure this out. I'm the one that goes, why did you do that? What are you doing? You didn't tell me. You didn't consult with me on if that was a good idea. Like, what were you thinking? Like, I almost turned into the client. Like, I role reverse it as if they work for me because it's like, what are you doing? Like, we're supposed to work on this as a team, and you're just doing stuff, right? And sometimes that directness does not land in the way I would hope it lands, which is we need to do this together. Instead, it comes off as he's an a-hole and he's yelling at me, right? It's like that's not how I was approaching this. It was more of like, look, if I have to ask you for stuff, why don't you ask me? We're working on this together. Don't just do it. I know it's your business, but like, what if what you changed got us shut down? Then everything I just worked on doesn't matter. Now we have to start over. Right? It's a lot of work to start over. That sometimes doesn't land in a way that I would hope. It pisses them off. And then oftentimes they're like, I don't want to work with you anymore. You don't want to work with someone who's as powerful as you. That's basically what it is. You don't like that someone else is coming back to you with their critique. And that's fine. Because I could take the critique. You could yell at me. I'll still smile. I'll still be like, okay, no problem, sir. It's all good. And then as soon as I'm off the call, I'll be like, that was dumb. But it's okay. That's not up to you to hear and feel. That's on me. But critique is critique. There's something to learn from it. And so I've worked with people that don't like critiques. I've worked with people that don't like to be, I don't yell at them, but they don't like to just hear me talking in a way where it's like, what are you doing? They don't like that I tell them how to spend. It's like, I don't want to operate in scarcity. Why are you blowing all your money on a Lambo and a house? It's affecting the business. Like, what are we doing? but they don't like that either. So it's my way of looking at how I operate my business and how I operate my life. And it's like, why aren't you doing that too? Take care of the family, put some aside for the business, put some aside for future investments, whatever it may be. Now go play. Now go do whatever you want. They don't like that I get involved in that level of business, that level of their life. And sometimes that is why they go, this isn't for me. They'd rather just have a yes man or a yes woman. No problem, sir. You got it, sir. And then they just do it. Right. And that's it. And that's fine. That might give you the contract for 12, 24, 36 months. I can't do that. I'm here for longevity. I'm here to help you build something that even if you sold it later, you go, that's the guy that helped me do that. That's what I'm looking for. And that doesn't always vibe with somebody. It happens. So, at the same time, I have fired clients too. I have fired clients for yelling at my employees. Yell at me. Don't yell at my employees. They have nothing to do with why something went wrong, why something may have been broken. Like just leave them alone. Yell at me. Don't disrespect my team. The minute my team gets disrespected, I don't want to work with you anymore. It shows me where you don't value them as much as you value me, so you go yell at them. Got it. Same thing with lack of communication or changing the scope after we've already started. Right? Like things like that after we've had countless talks over and over and over. If all of a sudden you just flip flop something, mm-mm, that tells me how the rest of this agreement's going to go. We're going to build something up for 3 months. You're going to flip it again. We're going to build another thing for 3 months. You're going to flip it again. It's going to drive me insane. It's going to stress me out. And then also the one that just pisses me off more than anything is we build you up to a certain point. My contract fee is about to change. And right as it's about to change, you want to bring it back down. Hey, what can we do to save some money over here? If I ever hear that, I already know you don't want to pay, which means that you're going to try to penny pinch everything you can to make sure you don't have to pay our top dollar because we got you there. We deserve that. But you're like, you know what? I don't think they deserve it. So I'm going to find ways to cut back on other things so we can keep them in this threshold. The minute I feel that we've maxed out our agreement, you can go work with someone else. Or I'll put you on autopilot, meaning we'll just do just enough. We'll do just enough. Now that eventually will get us fired because they'll notice that we're doing just enough, right? Our reports are shorter. Our campaigns aren't being deployed as often, right? Things like that. But if you don't value us as much as we value you, why should we put in that extra level of effort, right? And guess what? Employees do it worse than we do because we could see how many times they log in. It's not often, right? Once every 3 days. Oh yeah, change campaigns. We were in there like 3 times today, right? And so that's oftentimes where there's like that battle between the service provider and the client because you don't quite know how you operate with each other until things are on a roll, until things are going. And the funny part is sometimes this could take 6 to 12 months. Like you could just be killing it. And then all of a sudden, one thing happens and you're like, damn, I don't know if I want to work with this person anymore. It happens. It's like being in a relationship. You're with you could be someone for 2 years and then one thing happens. You're like, oh man, I don't know if I want to deal with this anymore. It happens. So
Yeah.
I oftentimes tell my clients, I'm like, we're in a relationship right now. We're in the dating phase. Those 3 to 6 months are the dating phase. If we make it past 6 months, I might propose to you. And if we're after a year, we're getting married. But here's the funny thing about marriage: 50% end in divorce. So I know you're gonna leave me at some point. I make that joke all the time, and they love it because it's true. Most businesses don't stay with their service provider forever. But my goal is to get you to the point where you always remember me. And then you will refer me people all the time because, oh, David helped me get to here. David helped me get to here. That's all I'm trying to do. Just get you to the point where you're like, I remember where we started here and we got to here and it was because of him. That's all I'm trying to do. But you don't always get that. You just learn about each other as time goes on.
I love it. And it's very, very true. There can be things where you're working with somebody for quite a long time and then they just say one thing and it flicks the light switch in your brain. You're like, oh, this person isn't who I thought they were. There's somebody a little different.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's the beginning of the end.
Yeah, yeah,
What happens.
yeah. You just I one of my really good employees is like as long as the invoice is paid. That's always our joke internally.
Hmm.
Is like, as long as the invoice is paid. And I've always responded with like, that's not all I care about. I understand where you're coming from. It's like, look, we got work done. The job's been done correctly. We're getting them results as long as the invoice is paid. But sometimes not all money is created equal. And I've had
Hmm.
some invoices paid where I've messaged the team and I'm like, the dirty money has cleared. Like I've written that. Oh, the dirty money is cleared. I guess we have to do another 30 days of work now. It's just one of those things. But whenever I get that feeling, when it's like, ugh, I don't know if I even want to get on a call with this person, that is the beginning of the end. I could
Yes.
already tell that it's going to be done in the next 30 to 90 days. We're probably not going to be working with this person anymore. Because if I feel it, I have a pretty good indication of they're probably feeling it too.
Oh,
I just happen to
100%.
I just happen to identify it a lot sooner. That's
Yeah.
all.
It's so true. It's like that feeling like some money is light and some money is heavy.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Exactly.
And we all want the light money, not the heavy
Yeah. Yeah. I just want it to be
money.
easily, just move it easily in the account. I don't want to have it to where it's like a struggle. It's like, oh man, I don't know if I can move it over here, but it happens.
You talked earlier about, your early stage where you were
Hmm.
just kind of just about surviving. You had your girlfriend with you, now your wife,
Yep.
and you've built your family together.
Hmm.
And just want to kind of hear your thoughts on that and like, how important that her faith in you was at that time.
Yeah. So she she's been around since the very early stage of just business in general. Um, I very much was involved in making sure my business was built in a way where it was financially stable enough to take care of us first.
Mhm.
And then is it stable enough to take care of another human being, let alone possibly two, three, however many down the road. Right. And I didn't want to bring more people into this world, eventually have my kid. I didn't want to bring more people into the world where my business was so, you know, unstable that I wouldn't be able to spend time with my family because I'm so busy trying to make this stuff work. So a lot of things got delayed along the way. The our marriage got delayed because I was unsure if I was even going to be able to build this thing to where it would make sense for us to be able to afford living together. Right? Just a lot of things got delayed. Proposal got delayed, marriage got delayed, everything, having a kid, it got delayed. All of it was delayed because I'm like, I need to hit a number so then I know we're okay. When that number was hit, I was like, we're good now. We are good. We have a base. If something, God forbid, happens to my business, we are still okay for at least a year. And I know I could figure this out myself in less than a year. But at least for a year, if we needed to take a break, if you needed a longer maternity leave, if I needed to be by your side for a whole year, no work, we're okay. That's all I was trying to do. And once I got to that point, I'm like, we're good. We can go build a family. We can build a life with each other. We can get a dog, whatever. We could do all these things, get a house. Because now it's more stable. That's all I was trying to do. And she went with that plan. She remembers the original plan of like, this is how we're going to get out of debt. Got out of debt. Here's how we're going to build some savings. Got some savings. How we're going to get rid of the school debt, separate from regular debt. Got rid of the school debt. Like just one thing at a time. And she went along with the ride, and she was a part of that process of the work that went into it. And then it eventually got to the point of, all right, well, what do we need if we're going to get married? What do we need if we're going to have a kid? What are we going to need if we want a house? And we just kept one thing after another, adding to the next thing, to the next thing, to the next thing. And it eventually got to the point where she's like, you have this under control. And she allowed me to just operate in the way I needed to operate. So that way it was the least amount of stress possible to make this all work. And now it's like anything that we want to do, we converse with each other on it, what needs to be done to make it a reality, and then we just do it. And it was probably the easiest way to approach it. Yeah, it took a little longer, but we did it in a way where it's like we're still here. Like if I rushed into everything, I can only imagine where my business would be now. I know it wouldn't be at this level because I would have been so stressed. I probably would have been like, I can't do this anymore. It'd be too much. But it all fell in place at the right time in the right way, regardless of all the stuff that happened in between. It all worked out perfectly.
So just finally to ask about, you talked about all the different plans you made along the way with your wife
Yep.
as you're building your business and creating your family life. Can
Yep.
you just kind of maybe give a short summary of your planning process and how you about that and how you would advise other people to create plans to build their future?
I know it's going to seem kind of simplistic, but it's like budgeting is incredibly important in business in the very beginning because we all like to buy every piece of software. We all like to buy courses because it's new. It's the new shiny thing. Don't get me wrong. I've had months where I'm like, why do I have so much software? I don't even use half this stuff. But it's because I'm testing, right? In my line of business, I actually have to test a lot. So I'll invest in 5 softwares for like 4 months, spend a crazy amount of money, and then I cut 3 of them, right? It's a part of what I do. But in saying that, I also want to make it very clear that you don't need every tool in your tool belt. You can hire too quickly, you can buy too much, you can invest too much as well. So I oftentimes when I start something, it's like, okay, what are my baseline finances that I need to operate the business, right? Do I need $3,000 a month just to operate the business as a solopreneur? How much do I need for this to stay where it's at and operate? How much do I need to make so that this can cover the operating costs? But how much do I also need to make so I can pay myself a livable wage to not be in scarcity every month, right? And by livable, I don't mean 20 grand a month. There are some people that literally could make 5 and be fine, but they don't know this because they don't do the math, right? And so if you need 3K to operate the business and 5 to be in a livable situation, that's 8 grand before taxes. Now, if you need to factor in some taxes, maybe it's around 10 or 11. So you need to make 10 or $11,000 a month to pay yourself and to cover your operating expenses. How the hell would you have known that without doing a budget, right? What of these expenses do you really need? Do you need to make more than that on the income side? Do you need more than 5? Maybe you need 7, right? If you have kids, you definitely are going to need more than that, right? And then on top of that, do you have loans? Do you have other debt? How can you pay them back faster? Well, now I got to make 15. So then I could speed up the debt repayment process, right? Every time you add in that next thing, that number goes up. But in understanding that number, you can create the progress bar that you need to know what do I have to do to get to this point. That's exactly what I did. I had school debt, car debt, all this stuff. And I'm like, what, how much do I need to make just to cover the debt? How much do I need for the fixed bills? How much do I need for variable bills? How much do I need for the business? And once I added all that together, I was like, just to live, I had to make 12. Just to live, I had to do 12 to do all these things and get rid of it in like record time. I just to get rid of it, it was like in 2 years, I can get rid of all the debt if I just make this much. And once I made 12, I was like, oh my God, if I make 12 every month for 2 years, all the debt's gone. All of it. And then I could start putting money aside. Imagine how it felt when my business was doing 20. Oh my God, I have 8K extra? What? Now all this stuff's gonna fly. And that's exactly what happened. Because now I was paying things off faster. Operating expenses stayed the same. I paid myself. And then all the extra, now I can start thinking about a house. Now I can start thinking about, you know, let's say my wife's car died in a year or two. I have something set aside to get her another one. Saving for a kid, say whatever it is, set it aside. And I was consistently just sticking to that number. But you only have to do it for a year or two and everything changes. It's not that long. It goes by really fast when you're in business. So having a proper budget and a forecast and understanding the numbers you have to hit, and then if you actually hit those numbers, how quickly your life changes. It's not about making the $1,000,000 in a year. You can make 150 in your life changes. You can make 100 in your life changes. You just got to understand the math. And for me, in full transparency, if my business did 180 in revenue in 2016, my whole life changed. And I did that in the first year that I was properly tracking. And then it changed even faster the year after that because not only did I blow past that number, my numbers changed after a year because I recalibrated. Debt was gone, or some of the debt was a lot lower. Our operating expenses were lower. So things just changed faster, all because I knew my numbers. So if you don't know your numbers now and you just know how much you make and how much you spend, that's not enough. You're probably spending a lot more than you should be. And so, yeah, take the time to really understand your numbers, budget accordingly, forecast accordingly, changes everything.
David Schloss, thank you so much. Been a great
Absolutely.
conversation.
Not a problem.
Appreciate it so much.